Cincinnati Kid. Hubbard's got a convoy. Chased by Andrews. At the 30, the 20. He will score.
To the end zone, down the field, and it is deflected and gone. Touchdown, A.J. Green.
Over goes back to throw. Men are coming late. Looks right down the middle. There's Eddie Brown. He has it at the 35 to the 30. He may go 10-5. Touchdown.
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up.
Yeah.
It is good.
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards. And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20, touchdown. And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Chad Johnson's got it. Touchdown, Cincinnati. Look at Chase go. Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found. Case for the touchdown. Wow, Chase is on the case.
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football. Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam.
The entirety of that game falls on the offense, and the offense not waking up until it was too late.
Well, look, you can't go first half and go scoreless. Ben Baby, you mentioned, tweeted it out. Bengals haven't scored a first half touchdown in an opening game in 3 years now. And for a team that relies on the offense, it's completely unacceptable for them to continue to have these slow starts. And again, it's one thing for the defense to give up 16 to the Patriots. Quite frankly, I thought there were some things that the defense did well. I thought there were some things that the defense did poorly. At the end of the day, the offense just did not have it all game outside of one or two drives. And so, you know, for Joe Burrow to have 21 of 29 for 164 yards against the New England Patriots, completely unacceptable. For the Bengals to only have 224 yards against the New England Patriots, completely unacceptable. For them to only rush for 70 yards in a game where realistically you should have been running the ball the entire the second half because you should have had a big enough lead to not have to worry about throwing the ball, completely unacceptable. And it's yet again, this coaching staff, for whatever reason, has not been able to get the team going early on in the season. And now you go into next week and you go into Arrowhead and have to face the Kansas City Chiefs in a game where you were hoping to come out of that 1-1 because you pick up the win against the Patriots. And then, you know, worst case scenario is you're 1-1, but now you're coming in, you've got zero momentum after a heartbreaking loss, a game in which the offense can't put together anything of value outside of one 90-yard drive, multiple turnovers that continue to serve as gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. And it just left in a scenario where the Bengals faithful are yet again left in a scenario of wondering what happened. And I think it starts with the offense for sure. And so we'll talk about it there. And Jacob, one of the storylines heading into today obviously was the wide receiver room.
Right.
We knew that there were question marks around Jamar Chase, his contract status. He plays today and he plays basically the entire game. On the other side, T. Higgins, a guy who signed his franchise tag early on, seemed to be happy. Everything seemed to be going well. And then all of a sudden shows up on the injury report this week, even despite the fact that he said he felt great, the best he's ever felt going into week one. Wide receiver room, as deep as it is, didn't really have an opportunity today to showcase its depth. Joe Burrow scrambling a lot and not a whole lot of time to get the ball out. Let's start with the wide receiver room. Jamar Chase, quiet in the first half, comes out in the second half, gets a little bit more opportunity. I was glad to see him out there, obviously, but disappointing output from him in the end. He goes 6 for 62 on the day.
Yeah, obviously I would have loved to see a little bit more of Ja'Marr Chase in his first game back after how loud this offseason has been, but I don't know if he's the guy that I'm necessarily gonna point the fingers to right away. I mean, I think that as a team, as an organization, as a quarterback, Joe Burrow probably needs to recognize, or maybe they did know, that Ja'Marr Chase isn't at 100% speed and he's not ready to go. It looked like down the stretch he was starting to get his feet under him a little bit, but at least early in the game, I thought it was pretty evident that he hadn't been practicing this offseason, and that's okay. We thought we had the depth behind him, behind T. Higgins, that losing one of those guys, and in this case T, and then Ja'Marr in a limited facet, we thought one of those guys was going to step up, and that just wasn't the case. Andre Yoshivas looked pretty good, but only 3 catches on his 6 targets for 26 yards. That's not the step we were hoping that he would take. Charlie Jones barely did anything in the receiving game, just 1 grab for 5 yards, and he might have cost us the game with a fumble on a kick return. These young receivers, we really had hoped as Bengals fans were going to take a massive step this year, and they just haven't. And I know it's week 1, and it's a 17-week season. We have over 20 weeks till we get to the Super Bowl, which is still the goal of this team. But the team that I just watched play offensively, and we're going to get to the defense, which had some holes as well, but offensively, this team that I just watched was nowhere close to a contender this year.
No. And you know, look, I don't want to make too much of it. You never really know what's going on behind the scenes. The broadcast certainly seemed to zero in on Joe Burrow's hand and wrist a lot, especially in the second half. It didn't feel like vintage Burrow to me. He felt slow in his decision-making. There were some times where I felt like he had a little bit of time, and yet he was kind of forcing the issue, not really going through his progressions, trying to force the scramble before he even got through his progressions. It just, didn't feel like vintage Burrow to me. He plays only one possession the entire preseason. Other than that, no real game action. And so he comes out today flat. The first half, your leading receiver was Tanner Hudson with 2 catches for 18 yards, and 15 of those yards come on a play where he inexplicably is running with the ball 3 feet away from his body, one-armed, out in front of him, waving it around for the defense to knock out, and they do so easily. And turnovers were a big key to it. You mentioned Charlie Jones' key turnover on the punt, but then that one too, you're knocking on the door, score a touchdown, and just give it away. And that can't happen, especially early on in the season when you're already starting slow.
That's exactly right. And this slow start has been a reoccurring theme for the Bengals. The last week 1 victory was in the Super Bowl year when the Bengals beat the Vikings in week 1. And that was the first time or the most recent time that we had a first half touchdown in week 1 with that Ja'Marr Chase bomb down the sideline. The Bengals have started slow year after year after year now. And I think a lot of people were finally fed up with the whole relaxed off season, no preseason type of, mindset and attitude Zach Taylor had with the team. And he changed that this year. He had the starters play in the preseason. The defensive starters played a lot more than the offensive starters did, but the offensive starters still got a drive in that first preseason game, were engaged the entirety of the dual practices. Joe Burrow didn't miss any time because of injury, and then we see the same exact issues seemingly rear their head in week 1. At some point, my question is, what else needs to change? What else is tangible that we can change from year to year? Because at first we thought, hey, maybe these guys are getting hurt. Let's sit them all. Let's make sure they're all healthy. None of them play in week 1 or in the preseason. And then we lose week 1 to the Browns. We get blown out. And then this year we say, okay, maybe that was the wrong mindset. Let's play the guys in the preseason. Let's get them some meaningful reps in the offseason. And then we go into the Patriots, who was the worst team that we've opened the season up against in that stretch of slow starts. And we get embarrassed, 16-10 at home, and they just dominate the trenches on both sides of the ball. At some point, I don't know what else needs to change, but there's something else that needs to change, because I don't know who else to point to now or what else to point to now for these slow starts. I was very confident that this was the year that it was going to change, both because of the matchups and the willingness to get guys reps in the preseason, but obviously not the case. And I'm not here to blame Joe Burrow for the bad game, but 21 of 29, it's a pretty accurate play 164 yards, 5.7 yards on average. That's unacceptable. That's not what Joe Burrow does. That's not what the Bengals offense does. We have Jamar Chase. Take shots downfield. Start to capitalize. We saw late in the game in those last drives, it got looser. Burrow started attacking the middle of the field, and that's when you see the Bengals go on a 90-yard touchdown drive. They start driving for a field goal at the end of the game because they throw to Jamar Chase over the middle to attack the secondary, which is what the Bengals do. I think we just started the game off far, far too conservatively. Thought we had this in our back pocket. Thought the win was had, and you didn't think you had to go out there and take it. I think the Bengals started this game playing not to lose instead of playing to win, and I think at the end of the day, not getting started until too late in the game offensively is what came back to bite them.
Look, I don't think that we need to see the same thing we saw out of the Colts in the last preseason game where their starters were out there for the entire first half.
No.
But I'm not going to sit here and act like I think it's acceptable for the starters on offense. This team is supposed to be driven around offense to go out and play one possession the entire preseason. I honestly don't think that's enough. And yes, it's great that they got a couple reps. They didn't get that in the past, but it's not enough. And they clearly come out flat every single time. I would love to see them get action in every preseason game, or at least the first and the third maybe, but it's got to be more than a possession. Ultimately, the one possession that they got was a quality possession, but it just doesn't line them up for success when they then have to turn around and sit down for 3 weeks, especially with the bye week now that you have. Yeah. You're going to have time for the starters to get rested up and ready for that week one with the bye week that they have going into the season. There's no real reason in my mind for them to not play at all the second and third games. And I think that that's ultimately something that we're going to see and have that question mark moving forward. And then the other piece of it, obviously, is that you've had the continued distraction of, is Jamar Chase going to practice today? Is he going to play this week? Is he going to sign his contract? Are they going to announce it the Thursday before the Chiefs game against the Ravens? Are they going to announce it Sunday morning? Is he going to play? Is he going to do anything? Oh, now he's sick. Oh, this and that. Like, it's just the team can say what they want, but the truth of the matter is that it's distracting. And it's something that the team gets asked about every single media session. And it's been a distraction. And if the rumors are true that they are so close that this could have been done, there's no real excuse for this to continue to linger into the regular season. They have to get that done. They have to move forward. Whatever happened with T. Higgins and his hamstring, they have to figure that out. They've got to move forward. This wide receiver room, while there's depth, they don't have the clear, deep options behind 1 and 2, right? They've got really good depth pieces for the 3, 4, 5, spell Chase, spell Higgins here and there. But Andre Yoshivas, as much as we like him, is not ready to step in and be a clear number 1 or 2. It doesn't seem. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you the fact that their longest pass play of the day was 28 yards, and that was to Jamar Chase late in the game on a play where he found an open zone, is completely unacceptable. There wasn't a single ball thrown over 20 yards outside of that one pass the entire game. And that is not this Bengals team. This Bengals team has built their ability to run the ball, set up play action, throw the ball, take shots down the field, and Jamar Chase did not do that today. Andre Yoshivas did not do that today. Joe Burrow did not do that today. And so whether there's a question of whether or not Joe Burrow's wrist is strong enough to make those throws, or whether it's a question of just the play calling didn't set up for it, whatever it may have been, that was the piece that was frustrating to me, is that the play calling, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, didn't really feel like Bengals play calling. It was a lot of dinks and dunks, a lot of crossing routes underneath in front of the linebacking crew of the Patriots, which are fine on most plays. But eventually you have to do something to get the defense thinking otherwise. Otherwise, they're just going to sit there. They're going to wait for the dump underneath, and then they're going to attack like they did.
One player on the offensive side of the ball that I know this is going to be a very negative post-game show, but one player on the offensive side of the ball I wanted to compliment was Zach Moss. I think Zach Moss had a very, very good game today. He did exactly what I think his role in this offense needs to be. And as we've talked about ad nauseum with this Red season, even though guys don't necessarily, show up massive on the stat sheet, you need to applaud guys when they fill the role that they're asked to fill. And Zach Moss did exactly that. 9 carries for 44 yards, 4.9 yards per carry, a touchdown, and every single time he was hit in the backfield or hit at the line of scrimmage or hit on the goal line, he fell forward. That's exactly what he did every single time. That's exactly what he was advertised to do, and he delivered. He delivered. He played very, very well with just 9 carries in the game, and hopefully Chase Brown can emerge a little bit more, just 3 carries, 3.5 yards per carry there. If those two can both get rolling, the same of what we saw from Moss today, and then Chase Brown get rolling as a change of pace back, I still have a lot of confidence in this backfield. But now the nugget in my brain that I can't get out is Joe Burrow's wrist. The broadcast spent so much time zoomed in on him flexing it, twisting it, all the different stretches on the sideline. Why are you doing that unless there's some kind of storyline coming out of camp that you're worried about? And maybe they're just trying to create one, and that's certainly my hope. But now with the lack of downfield throwing and the lack of really creativity in the offense, I worry that it's not just the broadcast worried about his wrist, and the coaching staff might have that in the front of their mind as well. The last thing I wanted to touch on offensively is...
Real quick, before you move on, I just want to say, not only is it in the heads of the broadcast, not only is it in the heads of Zach Taylor and this offensive coaching staff, it seems to be in the head of Joe Burrow.
Right.
And that's the part that concerns me, is that Joe Burrow is sitting out there and he's clenching his fist the entire time. He's moving it around, it seems. It felt to me, at least based on what the broadcast was showing, that it was in his head. And so did that play into the fact that the Bengals weren't throwing the ball down the field a whole lot today? Did that play into the fact that he wasn't really comfortable in the pocket a whole lot? It didn't feel like. I don't know. We're reading into this. We're speculating. But at the end of the day, when you have a performance like you had today, he certainly seemed accurate. Even the balls that weren't completed, none of them were egregious. None of them were poor throws. It just didn't connect, and that's totally fine. I didn't feel like he played a terrible game.
Yeah.
But when you're only making one throw down the field, it just makes me wonder, is it that wrist a little bit playing into it? And regardless of whether or not it actually is hurt anymore, and if there's future concerns, or if it's just Joe Burrow being overly concerned, one way or another, that's got to get figured out, because you can't have it linger the entire season. And if he's not fully healthy, that puts the Bengals in a really tough spot, because their backup, I don't know what the status is currently, but I certainly don't want to see Logan in there in a regular season game if we can avoid it. So
we already watched one Logan Woodside game together, and that's enough for the rest of my life if I had got to pick. But, yeah, I mean, I think right hand up as a Bengals fan, I was wrong all offseason. All offseason, I was wrong. I said that Burrow's wrist wasn't going to be a factor when the season rolled around, and I said Jamar Chase's holdout won't matter once he puts the helmet on and steps on the field. Obviously, both of those things made a difference today. I mean, whether Burrow's wrist is all mental or there is some physical hindrance, it affected the game today. Whether it was just play calling or his physical ability, it had an impact on the Bengals losing that game. And then Jamar Chase not being at practice. I mean, I know over 10 yards per grab, 6 catches, 62 yards, no touchdowns, but still a very productive day. Very, very good by the line of the average receiver. But Jamar Chase isn't the average receiver. And playing against the Patriots, a secondary that's very young, their best player is a rookie, or a second-year player who was hurt his whole rookie year last year, Christian Gonzalez. I think everyone kind of circled this game as if Jamar Chase is out there, Jamar Chase is going to go crazy. And that just wasn't the case. He had a very average game by his own metrics. And that really, really upset me, because I was very, very confident that he was going to step out there and play well right away. But obviously not the case. Still doesn't change my opinion on Jamar and the whole situation, but certainly upsetting to start the season that way.
Yeah, and Charlie Goldsmith reporting now that Jamar Chase is saying that he had food poisoning, and that was where the illness that popped up was food poisoning. So I don't know. Maybe he wasn't fully healthy. Maybe he wasn't able to kind of go on the deep runs that he would normally go on. Again, we don't know. It's all speculation. This entire show is speculation. Thanks for tuning in, by the way. But at the end of the day, whether it's food poisoning, whether it's another illness, whether it's a wrist injury, whatever it may be, they got to put it behind him, because next week is going to be just as challenging. So did you have one other point on the offense, or do you want to move on to defense?
Nope, that was it for me. We covered everything I wanted to touch on offensively. I'm going to try to not get too down on this offense just 1 week into a 17-week season, so probably good that we move on before we tear down many more pieces.
Yeah, look, I they've started slow before. They'll start slow again this year, it seems. And so on the flip side of the ball, the defense, look, give up 16 points. Certainly doesn't sound like giving up a lot of points, but it's to a New England Patriots team that really only had Ramondre Stevenson as a main weapon. Ramondre Stevenson goes for 25 carries, 120 yards, 4.8 per pop plus his touchdown. Jacoby Brissett adds 7 carries for 32 yards of his own. In total, the Bengals give up 170 yards on the ground. That seemed to be the story of the game, Jacob, was the defense specifically against the run today.
Yeah, that's right. Ramondre Stevenson, we knew going into the game that if the Patriots were to win this game, were to control this game, it would be because of Ramondre Stevenson. And that's exactly how it shook out. 25 carries for 120 yards, just under 5 yards per carry, and a touchdown. That's what the Patriots are going to ask Ramondre Stevenson to do every single game. And if he doesn't do that, they will not win. So that's why they have such a tough formula for winning games this year. And that's why I was so confident that the Bengals were going to take this one away, because they're so one-dimensional. But they proved, even with practice squad O-linemen, that they were able to be one-dimensional and still execute running the ball with Ramondre Stevenson. 25 carries, 10 more carries than Jacoby Brissett had completions. 1 more carry than Jacoby Brissett had attempts. There is no question about who runs this offense. It's Ramondre Stevenson. The Patriots are going to go as he goes this year. And as we saw today, if he's really going, they might not be as bad as people think. But like I said earlier, that the practice squad players being called up and thrust into the Patriots offensive line exponentially increases my concerns about our defensive line and their ability to stop the run consistently.
One of the positions that many Bengals fans wanted this Bengals front office to address was the nose tackle position, and they chose not to. And it very clearly showed itself today with Ramondre Stevenson being able to pick up the yardage that he was able to pick up. Oftentimes, the Bengals, especially the edge rushers in the secondary, were in the backfield meeting Ramondre Stevenson early at the line, even in the backfield oftentimes, but were unable to complete the play and unable to bring him down. That lack of real pressure up the middle from that defensive front line really stuck out to me today in terms of their inability to stop the run and to really stop Jacoby Brissett on runs when he did scramble. So, look, Sheldon Rankins, probably a fine player. BJ Hill, fine player. Sam Hubbard, obviously. Trey Hendrickson, obviously. All fine players. But when you're rushing 4 and you meet the back in the backfield and he's able to get through your arm tackle and end up running for 16 yards, that's a problem. When you're blitzing off the edge and you're bringing Logan Wilson up the middle at the same time and both guys get through free and you have a free shot and the guy still gets through, that's a problem. Last year, there was a problem with this linebacking core being able to make the tackle. It seems to carry through this year. Right now, I have major concerns about this Bengals front 7 and their ability to stop the run. They gave up the yardage today, 120 to Ramondre Stevenson. What are they going to give up to Derrick Henry when they play the Baltimore Ravens twice? They're going to have to figure this out. They're going to have to shore up that tackling, because oftentimes it felt like they were winning the battle up front, but they weren't able to actually win the war by making the tackle in the backfield, despite the fact that they had the chance.
No, you're right. And that was one of the biggest issues with the Bengals defense last year, was the lack of fundamentally being sound. They missed tackles, they blew coverages, and all those issues just continue to present themselves this year. We thought those issues might have stemmed from Nick Scott wasn't a rookie, but new safeties in the back end of the defense, a little bit of regression from those linebackers. If I would have asked you two years ago what position you're most confident in for the 2025 Bengals season, you probably would have said linebackers on the defensive side of the ball. Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson were sure things for about 2 years, and then last year they take a major step back, and then today seemingly more of the same. You're absolutely right about looking out for a potential veteran linebacker signing, because I do truly believe in these two guys, especially Logan Wilson. I think he is a really special player, and we've seen them both play at such a high level before in their careers. But at some point, this team needs to win now. And if these two guys aren't going to be up to speed and play at the level we know they can play at, I think you're going to have to reassess it to a certain degree. But the other major thing I was watching on defense today was Dax Hill making the switch from safety to corner. In the first half, the Patriots certainly picked on him to start the game, consistently targeting his receiver. But later in the game, he straightened up a little bit, played a lot better, and I don't know if they were just going the other way or if he was truly playing better defense. It certainly looked like Dax Hill got better as the game went on.
Well, whether he got better or the Patriots just didn't have to attack him as much
Right.
because the run game was being so successful, I don't know which one it is. But very clearly, Dax Hill was getting worked in the first half. They were running a lot of quick routes, making him react to the motion of the receiver. And it didn't seem like his reflexes were quick enough in that first half to be able to react to those quick routes. And so that's certainly something that's going to have to matter. Now, look, I'd much rather him give up a lot of those under the middle routes, crossing routes that he was giving up today where he just didn't react as quick enough and the wide receiver broke free than to give up the deep bombs that he could potentially be giving up. Much rather that, don't get me wrong. But if a team is able to control the time of possession like the Patriots were able to today, then ultimately he's going to be on the field for a long time. Time of possession today, the Patriots had the ball for 34 minutes compared to the Bengals 26. Ultimately, a lot of that was because the run game was successful and their passing game over the middle and up short were both successful. And so Jacoby Brissett, mentioned it, didn't have to throw a whole lot of times, only 15 completions today, 121 yards on those 15 completions though. So, the receivers were getting open. Dax Hill getting picked on early for sure. Gonna have to see what that looks like moving forward. The other thing I'll say is that we just didn't call anybody else's name a whole lot. Right. Obviously, Geno Stone had that one interception opportunity in the end zone that he wasn't able to come down with. Tip your hat to Hunter Henry on that defensive maneuver by him to be able to keep that interception from happening. But just no real plays were being made anywhere on the field by this defense. And for a team that's really relied on the turnover and those big play momentum shifts, they just didn't get it today.
Yeah, that's right. And we thought a lot of these signings were going to be the guys that got that. I mean, you touched on Geno Stone there. He was the guy that led the league in interceptions last year. If he could have pulled one off for the Bengals there, we might be talking about a different outcome in the end zone there in the second or third quarter. But, man, I just expected to see a little bit more pop. I know we talked about it offensively, but defensively too. I mean, I understand Trey Hendrickson was in Jacoby Brissett's lap 2 or 3 times, knocking him down, standing right next to him as he lets the ball go. Just split seconds away from getting the sack, and it just never really happened. A lot of pieces on that defensive line, I think, were just a step slow today. And whether they were a step slow or the Patriots were just a step faster, I'm not entirely sure. But it looked like they were in the right spots, just half a second too late, which is something that I think can only go back to coaching. I think at this point, that can only go back to coaching. And the responsibility of getting your guys up to NFL regular season speed for week 1, that falls on the coaches. Preseason is slower. Joint practices are slower. Practice against your own team, obviously slower. Joe Burrow's not being hit in practice, which means defensive linemen aren't sacking the quarterback in practice. It felt like a lot of times today the Bengals would have had sacks if we were tagging off. But since we're playing tackle football and it's the regular season, these were completions and scrambles for 10, 15 yards. That's what can't happen. And I think it goes back to what you said about playing the starters for just one drive in the preseason and then checking that box and saying, hey, we made a change. We finally played starters. Not really. This preseason is much closer to what the Bengals did last year than what the teams that actually play their starters did this year. Playing them for just one drive doesn't really change anything. And I know Craig already said it, but that's the one thing that I keep focusing on now is for the last 2 or 3 weeks, we talked about, hey, Zach Taylor made the change. He played the guys in the preseason. It's going to matter against the Patriots. And then it didn't, because maybe he didn't really play the guys in the preseason. And I think that's something that we're going to have to look at next year. I really don't know how long I'm going to be upset about this game. And I mean that in terms of last year, the Bengals went up to Cleveland and lost to the Browns in dominating fashion. I felt like I had moved on pretty quickly from that one. I said Joe Burrow was not 100%. A lot of excuses, bad weather. We'll be fine. We'll bounce back. Even losing week 2 last year, I said, okay, the Bengals are fine. They'll bounce back. This one feels worse to me. This one feels worse than the start last year, just because of the expectations for the Patriots, the expectations for the Bengals, and where the issues came from with the Bengals. The issues came from places that I don't necessarily think there's an easy fix. I don't think you're just going to go out and automatically get better against the run. We're into the regular season now. The top free agents are gone. There's some guys that got cut from other rosters that you could bring in and maybe contribute. But at the end of the day, this is more or less the roster that you have to work with. And we know that the Bengals don't make in-season trades or anything like that. So to act like we're going to get some major mid-season addition at some point down the line is quite simply foolish. I think there's still reason to believe this team will get better. There was a lot of new pieces on the defense that were playing together for the first time. They're going to get better as the season rolls on. I'm not worried about that. I'm just starting to think about what happens if they don't get better enough. What happens if that next step isn't quite high enough to stop Derrick Henry, to stop the Ravens, to stop Isaiah Pacheco next week? I mean, we talk about Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry in this division, how worried we are to go up against this division. We play the Chiefs next week, who have a pretty dang good running back too in Isaiah Pacheco. We have other teams on this roster or on this schedule outside of the AFC North who have pretty darn good run games. If you can't stop the one-dimensional New England Patriots when you know they're running the ball, how are you going to stop the teams that have legitimate second threats? Teams that establish the pass, teams that can get the play-action pass rolling, teams that have a legitimate dual-threat quarterback. Jacoby Brissett is not a dual-threat quarterback, and he dominated the Bengals with timely scrambles today. Dominated them. I need to see a lot more from this defense before I really get excited about the Super Bowl again. I'm moving the goalpost for this Bengals season. I think there's a lot of things I need to see from this defense. I know it's just week one. Maybe I'm overreacting, but the game ended about 20 minutes ago. I'm allowed to overreact. That's why we do these shows. I'm really, really worried about the defense, not just next week, not just the week after, long term, because there's some big improvements that they need to make.
Yeah, well, we have Chatterbox reacts when big news happens during the week. We can just call this post-game Chatterbox overreacts, and that's what we're going to do all season long. Let's not act like this is anything other than that. We're going to overreact. We're going to speculate. We're going to get upset. We're going to get overly happy. Look, the Bengals could very easily go out next week and find a way to beat the Chiefs, and we're going to be like, oh, the Super Bowl's back on, and we're going to ignore all the deficits that were brought to light this week. The fact of the matter is that the Bengals closed as 7.5-point favorites over the Patriots for this week. This is the biggest week one upset in the NFL since 2018 when Tampa Bay beat New Orleans per Ben Baby and ESPN. The biggest week one upset since 2018. Week one is the week where people are supposed to be feeling everybody out. It's going to be low scoring. Totally get that. But when a team is expected, and you brought it up earlier, is the odds-on favorite to have the number one overall pick in the draft this year, and you go out and you can't put up more than 10 points against them, that's a bad look. And defensively, look, I felt like Lou Anarumo made some good adjustments. I felt like the defense got better as the game went on, but then the last drive happens and they can't get a stop when it matters most to get the offense the ball back in the key moment as the time it was expiring. So, look, if we come out and we see the Bengals defense of the first half next week, then the Chiefs might put up 28 on us on the first half. They just might. I mean, between Isaiah Pacheco and the way he runs, Xavier Worthy, how quick and fast he is, looked incredible, obviously, and looked like a real weapon that they're going to continue to find ways to get the ball in his hands. And just quite frankly, the way that those two guys are built, this Bengals team better figure out how to tackle. Otherwise, they're going to have a lot of missed tackles yet again next week. And that Chiefs team is going to make you pay a lot more than the Patriots did this week because they're going to find ways to close and put 7 points up on the board rather than 3 like the Patriots did in many situations this week. So let's talk a little bit about coaching and play calling. Yeah. And we've touched a little bit on this during the first two segments. Obviously, we've touched about the preseason decisions. We've touched about some of the offensive woes. The thing that stood out to me at the end of the day was just the lack of shots from the offense. It felt like they made zero effort to really push the ball down the field. And one of the guys I wanted to talk to you about was active today, but we didn't really see him, and that's Jermaine Burton, a guy in the preseason who really didn't give you a lot other than 9 routes where he was just going on the go yard or a go route down the seam. And this Patriots team has defensive backs that a lot of people thought the Bengals could capitalize on. They weren't able to do it. Are you surprised that we didn't see Jermaine Burton at all, despite the fact that he was activated? Or is that something that is, if you can only run a 9 route, you can't really be on the field during an NFL football game?
Well, that's certainly part of it, and I think that reason is why he's not starting. I think that's why Andre Yoshivas is put on the depth chart above him, because we've seen when he's out there, especially this last preseason, that he can dominate those go balls. He's phenomenal in that route, and he does a really good job. He's a good receiver. He doesn't belong on the field yet, and I think that's just, pretty clearly based on how the coaching staff sees him. He's active today, like you said, and like we talked about in the first segment, no receiver outside of Jamar Chase stepped up. If the Bengals offensive coaches thought Jermaine Burton was ready to go and could affect that game more than anyone else that's out there, he would have been in the game. Obviously, they don't trust him when push comes to shove. I don't think he's there yet, whether it's mentally, whether it's physically. I really don't know. But I'm going to side with the coaching staff here on if they watched this game today and didn't see a single point in time where they thought they could use Jermaine Burton to help the Bengals win, then maybe he's just not ready yet. Because I saw a lot of opportunities today where I would say, hey, maybe Jermaine Burton's the better option here. But obviously the coaches disagree, and they certainly watch practice more often than I do, because I only watch what's posted on Twitter. So it's frustrating to see a guy that has so much potential and see it really come to fruition in the preseason. The greatest thing we could have ever hoped for was him to perform in the preseason, and he leaves the preseason with a perfect passer rating, and a lot of fans are really excited. And then you hear all the different stories about his shortcomings in the facility and at practice and with the playbook and everything else. I feel like the Bengals are making the move that they think is best for them to win right now, and that's Andre Yoshivas and Trenton Irwin. Trenton Irwin, 2 targets today, third most out of any receiver, and then the tight ends are going to take that third receiver role, it seems. Andre Yoshivas, same amount of targets as Jamar Chase. I love Andre Yoshivas. I really think he's going to be a good piece in this offense. Was Jamar Chase limited or not? Because he played a lot of snaps. He led the team in targets, but he didn't get enough production or enough touches to make me think he was completely healthy and ready to go.
Definitely didn't seem healthy. And, whether it's Jermaine Burton, Jamar Chase, Andre Yoshivas, the Bengals just didn't take shots down the field today. And, we'll have to go back. I subscribed to NFL Plus this year so I could go back and watch the All 22. I'm going to have to go back and really look, and I'll pull up, Chase's, I'll pull up his route tree and see kind of what he did throughout the day. I'll pull up Andre's. It just didn't feel like they were even running routes that were options for deep threats. Like every time that they threw the ball, it felt like they had 3 to 5 mid-yardage routes without anything over top. And to the Patriots' credit, and we saw it even on the Chase completion for 28 yards, they were playing 2 men over the top, and they were playing too deep and trying to prevent against that. And I'm sure that the Bengals are going to continue to face that all season long, where teams are looking to prevent them from going over top. But at some point, you have a top 3 wide receiver in the game right now in Jamar Chase. And if he wasn't healthy, then that's one story. But to not even give him a chance to make a play, to not give him a chance to beat a corner on an opportunity, felt like a complete miss, especially in a game where you're trailing at one point 13-0. And so, that was frustrating to me. And as we talk about play calling, certainly like the fact that Zach Moss got his, and the game kind of went the way it went, and you were kind of stuck with the options that you had. I don't need more runs in this game, but I need shots. Like
right.
The lack of deep balls was the question for me, especially as this game progressed.
And I think a lot of that might have just came from the lack of establishing the run. A 16-yard run from Zach Moss is the only thing that really makes that stat line look very respectable. The touchdowns and the yards per carry are great and everything, but 70 yards on the ground, that's not going to get it done. I know we're never going to be a run-first team, I certainly don't want us to be. We paid the quarterback. We're about to pay a wide receiver. But in order to be successful through the air, you have to have a respectable run game. That's what we talked about with the Patriots, why we didn't use them as the threat, because there's no air yards, and it was just the run game. Well, are a lot of people saying the same thing about the Bengals? Hey, we just have to stop the pass. They're not going to be able to run it on us. They might be. I think the run is much, much more important to the Bengals than we think. And I'm not talking about the counting numbers of the yards or where we rank in the league. We need to be able to seize the opportunities that we give these running backs, because that'll open up the pass game. And these guys are going to be nowhere near the league lead in rushes or attempts or yards. But they need to be in the league lead in what Zach Moss led the league in last year, which is yards over expectation. Whatever they're getting, they need to be getting a yard or two more, because that's the options they're going to have. Joe Mixon had almost 30 carries today. That's not going to happen in Cincinnati. You're just not going to do that on offense. So we need guys that are going to, really capitalize on those touches. And I do believe that we have them in the backfield. And I saw a little bit of it today. Obviously would want to see more. But your question about the play calling is the same one I had. Where were the shots? Where were the shots? When you're down at the beginning of the second half and you can't move the ball, you're going 3 and out, do you think maybe it's because you're doing 3 checkdowns and then punting? You didn't want to try to stretch the field at all? I don't know. I try not to be the fan that points to play calling, points to Zach Taylor, points to Dan Pritchard, but after today, it certainly feels tough not to. The 4th and 1, and you run a flip pass to Yoshivas instead of giving the ball to Jamar or Zach Moss, who would be able to get a yard all day. It just truly doesn't make sense to me, and it just goes back to the same camp that's been here for years, that Zach Taylor's not a very good play caller. I don't personally put myself in that camp, but after today, it's certainly going to get louder with takes like that. Whenever you lose a game you shouldn't lose, and you can't point to, another glaring issue, it's going to fall on the coach and the play calling. And we see it happen all the time across all sports. Whenever a team loses a game they shouldn't, the first one that gets blamed is usually the coach. And I'm already seeing it in our chat, people blaming Zach Taylor. And look, at the end of the day, if that's how you feel and that's what you want to say, I think that's completely fine. You're like I said about 10 minutes ago, the game ended 20 minutes ago. So whoever you want to blame to make yourself feel a little bit better today, that's completely fine. But I don't know that there's one person on the Bengals that is to blame for today. I just don't think that there's any one thing to blame. I think Joe Burrow could have played better. I think the offensive coaches could have taken more shots, could have gambled a little bit more. I think the defense, I know they only allowed 16 points. They could have played better. Special teams certainly could have played better. You had a great 80-yard punt that was phenomenal, longest punt in Bengals franchise history, and then it's about a third of a yard rolls into the end zone for a touchback instead of putting him at the 1. That could have made a massive difference in the game. And then obviously Charlie Jones fumbling the punt return, that just handed them points after getting a crucial stop. I think there's much, much too much piling up against the Bengals today. A lot of it self-inflicted, but a lot piling up against the Bengals today that I'm not going to kill one person. I'm not going to kill one side of the ball. If the issues persist, then certainly we'll get to that point. But at this point, I think the team just needs to be better.
Look, one more comment on the coaching and play calling, and then we can move on to talk about the new additions. You mentioned, first of all, the lack of establishing the run, and I certainly think that plays into this whole conversation. The first 3 Bengals drives in the first half, 9 total plays, 3 rushes for 8 total yards on those 3 rushes. Not going to get it done when you're talking about establishing the run. Look, the conversation all offseason around Dan Pitcher was that he's going to bring more creativity to the offense. He's going to bring more excitement and more creativity, get the wide receivers open. We saw a little bit of it. Jamar Chase going in motion a number of times, some of these things, but I just didn't see anything that really made me believe that was a true statement that Dan Pitcher is going to bring this new creativity and this new excitement to this Bengals offense. It's week 1. I'll throw my hands up. I'll say, look, I'm not going to make any judgments right now, but you're going up against probably the most creative offense in the league, if not a top 2 most creative offense in the league next week in the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to see Dan Pitcher match that creativity. So when I'm talking about something that I'm looking forward to next week, I want to see what Dan Pitcher as an offensive coordinator and as a play designer, regardless of whether he's calling the plays or not, as a designer of the plays, I want to see what he can do. And yes, Zach Taylor, I am on the record of not loving his play calling. I have called for Brian Callahan in the past, Dan Pitcher currently, to be the ones calling those plays. But at the end of the day, those play designs are oftentimes drawn up by that coordinator. So let's see what kind of creativity we can get out of Dan Pitcher, see if he can match the creativity of the Kansas City Chiefs next week.
That's right. I think that's enough on the defense. Sadly, and the coaching and play call, you can only blame it so much. The players on the field are the ones that have to execute. And at the end of the day, today, they did not. One of the new additions, one of the key new additions came very, very close to executing. Geno Stone, both hands on a ball in the corner of the end zone, almost brought it in for his first pick in stripes, but a great defensive play by Patriots tight end Hunter Henry to break that pass up. Other than that, unless you count Dax Hill moving to corner as a new addition, we didn't hear a whole lot from the other big name signings this year or today.
No, you didn't hear their name at all. And quite frankly, outside of that one play from Geno Stone where, Hunter Henry went up and made a defensive play to keep him from making the interception, we didn't really hear his name either.
Right.
Which, look, I'm on the team where I don't really want to hear the safeties' names outside of interceptions. Like the fact that if we have to hear your names, it means that the front seven's not doing their job. So I'm okay with not hearing those names a whole lot. But yeah, just defensively, not a whole lot of anything to get excited about, to be honest. Offensively, I think there's some things that we can get excited about, right? Well, let's start. Obviously, we've talked about him a little bit already, but let's start by talking about Zach Moss. The Bengals make the decision to go away from Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon and the Houston Texans today win 29-27 in a shootout over the Indianapolis Colts. Joe Mixon gets 30 carries, 159 yards, and a touchdown. He also catches 3 balls out of the backfield for 19 yards, 5.3 yards per carry for Joe Mixon. Now, Zach Moss today, 9 carries, 44 yards, 4.9 yards per carry, did catch 2 balls for 17 yards out of the backfield. I liked what I saw out of Zach Moss today. And regardless of what Joe Mixon did for the Houston Texans, I felt like I saw an upgrade at the running back position, despite the fact that he got limited touches, right? So the reason that the Bengals made the decision to go away from Joe Mixon and to rely on Zach Moss moving forward is that Zach Moss brings a different element to the backfield. Joe Mixon was incredibly reliable, didn't fumble the ball, didn't turn the ball over, but he also just gave you what he got, and that was about it. He never made guys miss. He never really fought for a ton of extra yards. He was what he was, and that's what he was. Zach Moss, on the other hand, we saw multiple times pushing piles, making guys miss, falling forward for that extra yard or two. Those are the things that over the course of the season I think are really going to serve beneficial for this Bengals running game. Now, it didn't pay off in week 1, but I saw the start of what the Bengals are looking for out of the running back position with Zach Moss.
That's right. And I've said it about Joe Mixon time and time again. When you gave Joe Mixon the ball and it was a 3 or 4 yard run, he would get 3 or 4 yards. If it was a 10-yard hole, he would get 10 yards. If it was a 1-yard hole, he'd get 1 yard. There was not one time today on the 9 carries Zach Moss had where I feel like he went down where he got hit. It was a matter of how many extra yards was he going to get, not was he going to get extra yards. And that is exactly what I wanted out of this running back. I don't want a 1,200, 1,500 yard rusher. Joe Mixon is going to have bigger counting numbers than Zach Moss this year. But he's going to have a lot more carries to get to that point. Zach Moss is going to be able to be a productive runner, getting what needs to get done while having a very, very small number of carries. And I think as we get into the season, Chase Brown's going to get to be used more and more and more. And I think they're both going to be productive. So I saw enough out of the running back room today where I still feel extremely, extremely confident that they made the right decision letting Mixon go. And And yeah, I think if you look at the end of the season and you're comparing their numbers on box scores and comparing their season-long numbers, sure, Mixon will probably have more rushing yards, more touchdowns, but that's not why you make the trade. Or I guess it was a trade. That's not why you make the trade with the Texans to get rid of Joe Mixon. You make the trade because A, you're going to save money, and B, you're going to get more explosive and younger. Both those things are incredibly important. The Bengals are not going to be a run-first team. Joe Mixon is a running back that works best in a run-first offense. I think we have two guys that are going to capitalize on what they are given this year far more than Mixon ever did.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think we're going to see more out of the running back position moving forward. We didn't really get to see what Chase Brown is going to bring to this offense, I think. He did have 3 catches for 12 yards out of the backfield, but only 3 carries for 11 yards in this one. So 6 total touches for him. I think that he's someone that can really serve as a change of pace and bring a little bit of that speed and creativity to the outside. So we're interested to see what we get out of him moving forward. The other key addition on the offensive side of the ball was Mike Gesicki. Obviously, final stat line, not great. 3 catches, 18 yards for Gesicki. Look, if he comes down with that ball in the end zone in the first half, we might be having a completely different conversation today. He went out, made a leaping grab, but as he was going down to the ground, lost control of the ball as his elbow hit the turf. Could have been a completely different outcome had he been able to hang on to that ball. But Gesicki did give you what you expected, and that's that red zone target in those key situations. Now, what we see out of him moving forward, once T. Higgins comes back, it'll be interesting to see. What did you like out of Mike Gesicki today? What more would you have liked to see? What was your takeaway?
What more would I like to see? I would have liked to see him hang on to that touchdown. But other than that, really, he showed me what I expected today. And that's the silver lining I'm taking away from this game is I checked a lot of boxes where I wasn't sure what the guy was going to be used as. And Mike Gesicki, that was a big question for me because he was listed as the second tight end on the Bengals' initial depth chart behind Drew Sample. And then we see him out there basically all game today. He's the third down target to start the game. The first 2 third downs, Joe Burrow looks his way. And then obviously, right as soon as the Bengals get into the red zone, the ball goes up to Gesicki in the corner. And that's exactly how I hope that they use him this year. I hope Mike Gesicki is our wide receiver 3. I think he's a third down threat, a red zone threat. And I said it during the stream as soon as he caught that third down pass. I said, that 3rd and 8, that's 3rd and Tyler Boyd. That's what all Bengals fans have come to know is as soon as it's 3rd down and 5 to 8 or so, that's a Tyler Boyd slant across the middle. He'll catch it and we'll keep the ball moving. I think that role is going to go to Mike Gesicki this year. I think he's going to be one of the better middle-of-the-field red zone targets that Joe Burrow's had in his career here. I think he's better in that role than Tyler Boyd was at the end of his career in stripes. I really did see a lot of good things from Gesicki today. With T out, I do wish that he would have stepped up and really thrown himself into that number 2 wide receiver in the offense, ball catcher, pass catcher in the offense with T. Higgins out. I think that would have been a really, really refreshing thing to see in this offense as we're concerned about the depth. But yeah, I think Gesicki was great. And I think the main concern with the tight end room at this point is why do they feel the need to keep playing Tanner Hudson so much? He was in the game an awful lot. I mean, we were here on cut day, and I thought he was going to get cut from the Bengals. But alas, he's on the field in week 1 and might have cost us the game with a fumble. 3 targets today, tied for the 4th most on the team. I can't wrap my head around why the coaching staff doesn't think we have better options than him, especially in the short yardage passing game, especially in the red zone.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, Tanner Hudson did what he was supposed to do. I mean, he made the catches. He was running for the extra yardage. It just terrible mechanics by holding the ball out away from his body. And I still am in the camp that Tanner Hudson can bring something to this team as a patch catching true tight end. Obviously, Drew Sample is not someone that is relied on a whole lot to be catching passes out of the tight end position. He's more so in there as basically an extra offensive lineman. So I do think that there's value from Tanner Hudson. Yeah. Especially if you're going to have Mike Gesicki be your 3rd wide receiver rather than a true tight end. So there's value there, but again, certainly disappointing outcome. The other position that I want to talk about in terms of newcomers is the offensive line. and Trent Brown and Orlando Brown Jr. are supposed to be your twin towers. I didn't really get a great feel for the O-line today, if I'm being honest. Joe Burrow sacked 3 times, loses 10 yards, under pressure a number of other times. But it also just didn't, we talked about it earlier, it didn't really feel like vintage Joe Burrow. So, like, those sacks didn't feel as much on the O-line or anything as much as they did on either coverage or Joe Burrow. I didn't necessarily leave this game more excited or less excited about the offensive line and what it's going to look like moving forward. Did anything stand out to you around those two specifically, and in the right tackle and left tackle position or otherwise on the O-line?
If I'm going to be honest, no. I feel the exact same way I felt now about the Bengals offensive line as I did going into the season. I think they have really exciting pieces everywhere, and I think the offensive line could be really good when they gel together. It's going to take a while to get there. We all know Trent Brown's been good in this league while he's been healthy, but he needs to stay healthy, and right now he is, and you hope he can maintain that. But you would have loved a spotless day. You would have loved the offensive line to come out and just shut down the Patriots, but Joe Burrow was sacked 3 times for a total loss of 10 yards. That's not winning or losing you any football games. That's not sack production that's going to cause you to lose a game. And I know when you lose a game 10-16, you can point at anything and say you lost the game. But 3 sacks for a loss of 10 yards, that's not gonna lose you a football game. So I'm still encouraged by what I saw by this offensive line. You knew that week 1 was going to be the worst they were going to be. You can't just plug in new guys and expect them to hit the ground running and be great as a unit of 5 bodies that have to work cohesively together to protect the most important thing on the field, which is Joe Burrow. It takes a while to get your brains up to speed, working together in a new system with new pieces around you. That's crucial. And that's why we talk about how important it is to play in the preseason, and the position that it's most important for is the offensive line, and that just grows when you bring in new pieces, which is why I really thought that the Bengals were going to use the offensive line more in training camp. But the other thing that we have to remember now, Trent Brown wasn't here through the very, very beginning part of training camp as well, and didn't ever play in the preseason. So if you're looking at reps for the rest of the offensive starters, if you're talking about Jamar Chase's holdout affecting his play, Trent Brown might have had some similar things as well, even though I don't think he affected the outcome of the game today regarding poor play or great play, quite honestly. I think the offensive line was just about exactly what I thought it would be.
No real issues with the offensive line on my end. Will be interesting to see once Amarius Mims is healthy what the Bengals decide to do on that O-line. On the other side, what went wrong? The 3 sacks, certainly not going to lose you a game. What is going to lose you a game is a fumble at the goal line and a fumbled punt, giving the Patriots the ball in field goal range. 2 back-to-back possessions, giving the Patriots the ball that result in 6 points that they wouldn't have otherwise had. Ultimately, of course, the final score 16-10. And you can point directly at those 6 points that the Bengals gave the New England Patriots. The Bengals, 13 plays, 63 yards, 6 minutes and 33 seconds on the drive. And then Joe Burrow passes to Tanner Hudson. He gets down to the New England 2-yard line. Ball punched out, recovered by New England. And that threat immediately ended in what could have been a changing point going into the half, tied 7-7, or at least with some points on the board. And then after the halftime, New England goes 3 and out, 6 yards. They punt the ball away after only a minute and 18. And yet Charlie Jones gets the ball knocked out, helmet to the ball, and the New England Patriots take the ball back. They get it at the Cincinnati 24-yard line. 4 plays later and only 7 yards, they knock in a 35-yard field goal to go up 13-10, and the Bengals unable to surmount that change. Zach Taylor in his post-game press conference said 2 things led to this loss. It was the turnovers and it was missed tackles.
Yep. Those are the exact 2 things I was going to bring up. It doesn't get any more simple than that. Tanner Hudson holds on to a football, either scores or goes down at the 1, and the Bengals have 7 more points on the board there. And if you can do some quick math, a 10-16 loss, if you add 7 to the 10, the Bengals would win the game. So that fumble obviously crucial. And then the Bengals get the biggest stop of the game coming out of the half. Patriots get the ball, and you force them to go 3 and out, and then Charlie Jones just coughs it up. On the other side of the field, and the Patriots capitalize with a field goal. And that's why I have a hard time blaming the defense. I mean, you put the defense in just such impossible places all game long. I really think that the only thing you can point to is being sloppy. The Bengals were sloppy all year last year, and it came back to bite them an awful lot. And this year, it feels like it's more of the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are things that are going to have to be cleaned up. And quite frankly, say what you want about the coaching staff and some of the decisions that were made, the play calling otherwise, but those are 2 plays that are not on the coaching staff. Yeah, you can say what you want about Tanner Hudson making I'll call it idiotic decision to carry the ball the way he was carrying it, especially in the traffic that was there. But that's not on the coaching staff. Like, the coaching staff had this team in position to score a touchdown. Didn't happen because of a player lapse of mental judgment. Then the defense goes out. They get quick 3 and out on the Patriots. They get the ball back. Trenton Irwin, helmet to the ball. Not a whole lot that Irwin could do, Charlie Jones could do. But nonetheless, not something that the coaches control either. So look, we're all fed up. We all believe that the offense should have produced a lot more. But at the end of the day, this 16-10 ball game, you can drill down to those 2 field goals that resulted of those 2 turnovers that shouldn't have happened. And so I think when we look back at week 1, those are going to be the 2 things that really stand out. A lot of plays in the backfield where the Bengals seemingly had New England stuffed for a loss or a short gain that ended up being popped for long runs. And when we get back and watch the film and everything else, those will be things that are going to stand out for sure. Jacob, anything else on this one stand out to you before we wrap it up?
No. All the stuff that stands out is so upsetting and bad. I think we've covered it for long enough. It's week 1. There's 17 weeks in the season. Put it behind us. Hopefully the Bengals players and coaches do the exact same. Learn from what you need to learn from. Get better. Come out next week, because next week, if you look like this, it's not going to be a 6-point loss. If you look like this next week, it's going to be an awfully lot more lopsided on the scoreboard. So, to say the least, I'm incredibly nervous going into week 2 in Arrowhead. But we'll see how the Bengals react to a shocking week 1 loss, to say the least.
Yep, absolutely. The Bengals will be in Kansas City facing the Kansas City Chiefs for a 4:25 Eastern kickoff next Sunday on CBox. I'm sure that's the national TV game, so hopefully everybody will have a chance to tune in. Jacob and I will be live all game long yet again, watching it with live reaction. I'll do my best to have my streaming situation fixed up for that one so that I'm not 30 seconds behind the entire game and can watch this one along with you better. On the other side, real quick before we go, the Reds did win 3-1 today over the New York Mets. Be sure to join Trace and Nick tonight for Chatterbox Reds at 9 p.m. Eastern. They go live after every single Reds game, win or lose, bless their heart. We only have to do this 17 times a year, Jacob. Nick and Trace, they get the joy of doing it 162. Jacob and I will be live again on Tuesday.
That's right.
At 6 p.m. Eastern, I believe.
6 p.m. Eastern.
And we will have some more in-depth analysis of this one, any news that comes out between now and then, and look ahead to the game with the Chiefs. Jacob, anything else?
Nope. I'll just go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Obviously not how we wanted to start the season. 0-1 for the Bengals, but Chatterbox Bengals is your one-stop shop the rest of the year. Thank you, everybody.